Hey up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Today you join us about half an hour into a session on the bread punch on a local canal. And what we're going to do today is hopefully run you through how we go about attacking canals, fishing the punch. As I say, we're already into the session a short way and I've already fed a couple of lines, short line that hasn't produced, and I've already gone to 5 metres and we've just started to get into a few fish now. The key thing is with what we're doing today is we're just going to run through, there's a fish on now, run through the method, the rigs and the way we prepare our bait as well, just to show how you can get the best out of bread punch fishing. As you can see, it's a very effective method. You get into fish really quickly. It's a nice little roach there. So as I say, we'll try and build the weight and fish it as if we're fishing a match today, looking to progress along the peg further out, feed different areas, and as I say, try and build a decent weight. So I'll get into a couple more fish now, and I think what I'll do is run through the rigs and then the bait as well and show you what we're doing. Comical. As I say, we'll run through the rigs just quickly what we're doing. In terms of what we're fishing with today, we're fishing very positive rigs, and that's the key thing with bread punch fishing. We'll look at a bit more detail a bit later on, but as I say, the key thing is with the rigs, nice and positive, to try and get the bait down, fishing quickly and try and get bites quickly. So as you can see, not having to fish that much pole today. The canal here is only about 13 metres wide, so what I've done is actually I've plumbed up 3 lines to start with, and the key thing is when you are fishing bread punches, usually you'll have to pretty much chase the fish across the canal, so you want to get a good idea of what's in front of you when you're plumbing up, so in terms of where the near side shelf is, where the track is, and then where deeper points are across to the peg up to the far bank. So as I say, I've plumbed up a line short at a top kit that's just on the near side shelf in about 3 foot of water, something along those lines, and then I've looked for about 5 foot of water at 5 metres, just as the canal starts to level off a bit more. And I've also got a line that I've plumbed up at 9 metres, and that's near a sort of 6 or 7 foot of depth there, where the canal's just flattening out before it starts to go towards the far shelf. So what I've also done in setting up those 3 lines, I've left myself plenty of canal to go at should the fish back off. So as I say, we're into the session now. I started on that short line after I fed it. I didn't have a bite. There's another fish on now. So I gave that about 5 or 10 minutes, swing that one to hand. And then straight away looked at fishing that 5 metre line, let that settle for 5 minutes or so, and then straight away we've been into fish there. As you can see, decent stamp roach already. So I'll just pop another piece of punch on. So I say, you need to look at working your way across the canal. If you're not getting bites on a certain line after 5 or 10 minutes, then you want to look at moving. As I say, straight away we've got into fish by doing that. As I was saying, with bread punch it's a very positive method, so you're looking to catch fish pretty much instantaneously. It's not like ground bait or anything like that where you're looking for it to settle. And as you'll see as we run through the session today, we'll have to chase these fish up the far bank as they start to back away from the feed. But what you're looking for is indications within maybe 30 seconds to 5 minutes on your bread line, and if you've not had any, give it 10 minutes maximum. Then as I say, have a look at moving a bit further out as we've done, and you can see we're straight into a good run of fish. So I'm not going to completely discount that line on the top kit close in. but I wouldn't expect to catch there. As I say, if there's no fish there initially, then the odds are that it's not a depth that they're happy to sit in, or it's just an area of the canal that they're not happy to sit in either. I think definitely with the fact that on this bit of canal that we're on, you can see the near side towpath is quite bare and quite busy. And I think the fish do want to back off into that slightly deeper water further from the bank, and that's where they feel safest. But it's always worth feeding a line just on the end of your keep net or up the near shelf, because very often you can start there and quite quickly catch fish. Again, we haven't done today, as I say, I think with the disturbance and things like that on the near side bank. But as soon as we've gone to 5 metres, we've got into fish straight away. As you can see, we're getting a mixture of all different sizes, from sort of ½ ounce up to 2 or 3 ounces already, and those are going to be the mainstay of fish. I'd expect as the session goes on that we'll catch a few bigger ones further up the far bank later on. But the key thing is here is trying to put as much weight in the net as quickly as we can. Getting indications all the time on the float, which very often is the case. There's another fish on now. Because with the bread punch swelling up, little bits of bread falling off, you get lots of small fish pecking at it until something of a half decent stamp like that does take it. But as I say, you've got a bit of an idea of what we're doing today, and as we progress through the session we'll look at a bit more detail and things like that. But I think what we'll do now is quickly have a look at the bait we're using today and just show you what we're doing in terms of feed and hook baits. Right, so as I say there, you can see we're getting into a good stream of fish on the punch, so I'm going to quickly run through what we're doing in terms of the feed and hook baits and things like that. The key thing is with bread, it's a very positive method. You don't want strung out shotting and things like that, so you want your bait, the way I personally fish it, to get straight to the bottom, and then you're looking to register bites and catch immediately. So in terms of the punch, what you want to do is the ground bait that we're using is just neat punch crumb. This time of year, being that it's moving towards winter, late autumn now, I want to use punch crumb. The key thing, as you can see, is very fine particles, unlike liquidised bread. Say in summer and I was going for a bigger stamp of fish, or maybe fishing to the far bank for chub and big roach, things like that, then I'd look to use liquidised bread, more food content and something that you're going to be able to pick out bigger fish in your peg. Today we're looking to catch everything, so punch crumb's the key thing. What you want to do, as you can see, I've mixed up quite a lot today. I don't intend to use a lot, but I mixed it up this morning. You want to mix it well in advance of your session, give it plenty of time to take on the water, because again, you can't really mix it like ground bait. You're not looking to add water through just putting it in from a tub or whatever. What I actually use is an atomizer, and the key thing is with that, you want to use an atomizer, because if you put water straight into the mix, then it's going to clag up and you're going to end up with very big food particles. What you want to do is just use an atomizer like that, just to keep wetting the mix, keep turning it over and just progressively wet the mix up. It takes probably about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, so that's why I've mixed up quite a lot there. It's better to do it in bulk. You can always then bag it up and freeze it so it's ready for when you do go out on a session, and then you can obviously look at ways of riddling it as well. In terms of what I actually do once I've mixed it, is I'll let it settle put the lid on the box so it keeps all the moisture in, and I'll let it settle for about 15-20 minutes to absorb plenty of water. You can leave it as long as you want really, but then what I do is riddle it off. Today, because I'm looking to catch a decent stamp of roach, I've put it through a maggot riddle. Again, the size of riddle that you're looking to use will dictate the size of fish that you're after, or vice versa. So say if I was after a really small stamp of fish, I knew the canal was going to be very difficult middle of winter, and you're fishing for, you know, ½ ounce, 1 ounce blades, small roach, tiny skimmers, things like that, I'd probably even look at putting it through a flour sieve. Then you can move through the riddles up to squat, pinky and maggot riddles even. As I say, I know this canal's got some decent roach in it. This is a section way upstream of where I've normally fished, but generally the stamp of roach that I've heard in this canal is half decent, so that's why I've used a maggot riddle for that. To the mix then, what I do is I take an amount to one side, and that's going to be my feed bait for the day. So I'll pop the lid back on this and pop that out the way. That's just in case I need it if the fish are really having it. But I take out a decent few handfuls, as you can see there, and put them in a separate tub next to me. That's if I'm looking to top up regularly. And the key thing is always cover it, because it will dry out very quickly. And because punch scrum doesn't have any binding properties like ground bait, as soon as it starts to dry out, then it's not going to bind at all. And you're going to end up with, basically, if you feed fish coming up in your peg and a lot of missed bites. So you need to make sure it stays damp. To the mix there, you can see as well, I've added gravel. This is just aquarium gravel, and again, in line with what I was saying about being positive in terms of your bread fishing, you'll see when I do put a ball of bread together, you can see it binds quite quickly, and there's plenty of gravel in there, and that drags the bait to the bottom. You'll see when we do feed a bit later on, as we start to move across the canal, when I put a ball in, it'll go in and straight to the bottom, with creating just a small amount of cloud. I don't want too much cloud. Again, as you've seen the stamp of roach there, there's some very tiny roach, and if there's too much cloud, you'll get your peg infested with those, and you'll, as I say, you'll just end up with missed bites. They'll be pecking that piece of punch off the hook, and you'll be struggling really to get any weight together because of missed bites. As you can see today, I've already been coming back with fish pretty much every chuck in. So again, the amount of gravel is just dictated by how positive you want to be, and when you're fishing rivers, you'll put a lot more gravel in. I put quite a bit in, as I say, because I want to make sure I'm fishing very positively. But on a harder day, I might put a bit less in, just in case, say, I was really struggling for bites. I wanted to create a bit of a cloud. So that's the feed covered, and how we go about feeding the peg. As you saw when I did make a ball up, just to point out, this is the kind of size of ball that I'd look to feed on a line initially. Something like that. Again, I'm not feeding tiny little nuggets. I want to get plenty of fish in the peg, get them nailed to the bottom and catch quickly. So that's the size of ball that I'll look to feed. And I'll equally look to top up with a ball that size as well. Again, no point being any sort of aspect of negativity with this kind of style of fishing. You want to be nice and positive, plenty of fish in your peg and catch quickly. That brings me on to the hook baits. In terms of the bread that you choose for your hook, it's got to be medium slice and something with quite a fine sort of grain to it, so it makes a nice solid punch. That there's Warburton's toasty in the orange packet, and I've just pressed that down with a knife and taken the crust off before I've started fishing, and just left that in a bag. Again, you'll see when you're using bread like this, again, you don't want it to dry out, so you need to have your spare hook baits bagged up. And the rest, as you can see, I keep in my side drawer, which is just perfect for punching out. It's to my right hand side, so I'm nice and quick. Again, keeping the process efficient when you're trying to catch a weight of these fish. So it's very easy for me to just take a punch out of my bag and just take a piece of punch out the slice like that, and straight away you've got a hook bait there ready to fish. So again, you'll see as I'm shipping in and out and getting the hook and rehooking bread, things like that, you'll see how quickly I can catch because I'm nice and efficient. With it being in my side drawer there, I've got my disgorger to hand, and there's a nice solid base as well to punch against. The punches that I actually use are the Drennan brass head punches. As you can see, you've got quite a few sizes, but I tend to keep it quite simple. I don't tend to use the smallest size or the two biggest, so I use 3, 4 and 5 mil when I'm fishing for roach. If I'm fishing for very tiny roach, I might consider going down to a 2.5 mil, but that's very rare. So as you can see, the ones that I'll use, that's a 4 mil there, are those sizes. The others being, I think, 6 and 7 mil. Again, as I was alluding to with summer fishing, feeding liquid ice bread, that's when I'll use a bigger piece of punch. But in winter, this time of year, 3, 4 and 5 is my go-to on a 22 or a 20, and if I'm really bagging, I'll move up to an 18 hook. As I say, those are the punches. And what I'll often do is just leave a piece of punch like that in one of the punches, so again, just speeding up the process when I'm trying to make the most of the fish that are in my peg. Disgorger always to hand, and as I say, that's all the bait looked at. So we'll get into the fishing now and show you exactly how I go about employing the bread, and just basically try and put some fish in their net and run you through how I go about doing that nice and quickly and efficiently. So as I say there, we've run through the bait and what we're doing basically with the session, but hopefully what I'm going to do is, as I'm fishing and trying to build this weight today, I'll try and cover little tips and tricks that I'm doing while I'm fishing the bread, just to give you a bit of an idea of how I go about it. As I've said, the key thing to keep reiterating when you are fishing bread punch is fishing positive and making sure you're catching as many fish as quickly as you can possibly get away with on the day. What you'll see as we go through the session is the fact that the fish will back off the feed. Just missed another one there. So you've got to make the most of the fish while you're there. There's no point starting right against the far bank with this style of fishing. As I say, I've started on a top kit and then I've quickly moved out to 5 metres where I've got into fish. But you want to give yourself plenty of room to keep moving further and further as you're chasing the fish up to the far bank over the course of the session. Just concentrating a bit now because I've missed a couple of bites on this punch. I've just stepped up to a 4mm punch actually on this line, just to see if there's 1 or 2 better fish, and I've had a couple of quick plucks at it, but I definitely think there's a smaller stamp of fish there now. So I'll be looking to move down to the 3mm size. Again, just a little dink on the float there. You'll see as well when I'm fishing with these rigs is I use hollow bristle floats that I'll run through when I go on about the rigs in more detail. But I'll leave plenty of bristle because you'll get lots of little digs at the float which you don't want to be hitting. With bread bites, again, you're fishing off the bottom, so bites are going to be nice and positive using decent sized droppers. Just going to put on a fresh piece of punch. So you want to leave quite a bit of bristle showing, just to make sure that when the fish do take the bait confidently that you can hit that bite and you can identify it as a proper bite nice and fast. As I say, they're going to step down to a 3mm punch, but again on a size 20 hook. Quite often with bread punch fishing you'd be surprised what size hook you can get away with in contrast to the size of punch that you're actually using. Again, because bread will swell up over time while it's in the peg, you actually don't want to be fishing a punch size that sort of matches the hook. Say if you were fishing a maggot on a 24s, it'd look a bit out, but you'd go down to a squat. It's kind of the contrast with bread that you'd want to go something smaller than a squat if you were fishing on a 24, because as I say, it'll swell up and that'll obscure the hook point. And again, when you're fishing with bread, the roach don't tend to mess around with the bait so much, so again, plenty of hook point showing. Starting to miss a couple of bites now on this. So you want to have enough hook point showing to hook the fish. So again, I've just missed 2 bites in a row there. So actually, I'm just going to try a 2.5mm punch just to see if I can connect with one. If I do, then it'll tell me that those fish that are in the peg are very small, so I might need to look at topping up already on that line. Which again, if you do fish a section of canal quite regularly, to know it inside out, it's well worth timing how long you go between feeding, catching and topping up. As I've said, this section of canal I've not fished before, so I've got no real idea about it. I've fished the Calder and Hebble further down towards Brighouse, but today we're actually nearer towards Ellen, so several miles upstream. So I'm just trying to have, and there's a fish straight away on the 2.5mm punch. So I'm just trying to have to suss out the peg as if it were a match and I didn't know the section. Again, not a bad size fish, but you can just see there, stepping down from a 4 to a 3 and then to a 2.5mm punch, I've hooked that fish straight away. So I think what I'll do is actually keep plunging that line now with a 2.5mm punch just to see if I can build a bit more of a weight and cut down on missed bites. So yeah, a bit more about the section of canal that we're on today. As I say, it's just downstream from Elland, and it's actually called the Old Match Length. So it doesn't get fished that much, to be honest. Where I do usually fish that you've seen us on the Calder and Hebble before, down towards Averset Mills, that does get quite heavily fished. So the fish here haven't seen a lot of pressure. So again, that might affect the fishing somewhat. They might actually be quicker to move on to the bait and then back off quite soon after they've been disturbed. But again, I'm just going to have to suss it out today as we go along. It's quite surprising when I was plumbing up actually how the peg sort of lies. In terms of the width, because there's a fallen tree over the far bank, just missed a bite there. There's no actual far bank for me to fish as such, because that's the deepest point is under those trees in effectively what is the boat channel. So the peg effectively just goes away from me from about 3 foot to about 5 and then drops off again to about 6.5, something like that in the deepest water. Another small roach. You can can see the difference on the 2.5mm punch. So as the session goes on and I'm moving further across the canal, I'm actually going to be going into deeper water. So again, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to affect the fishing, but it's definitely not going to affect my approach to the peg. As I say, when you are fishing bread punch, you do need to have a plan when you do go to your peg. It's quite often you will use it in conjunction with other baits. As I say, we're looking to fish punch exclusively today, but quite often you'd have, say, a worm line or a squat line, something like that, to look at later on in the session. But you want to make the most of those bread fish while they're there, as I say, because you can catch so quickly. So as you move across the peg, it gives you time to prepare sort of bonus fish lines and ground bait lines while you're catching straight off the bat. Say if I was using ground bait or squat and pinky, it takes some time to build the peg, whereas bread punch, it's quite bizarre how it compares to other styles of fishing. So as soon as you put some bread in, there's usually fish on it immediately. And as I was saying earlier, that's why you get told very quickly by the fish that you're in the wrong part of the canal. As I say, I started short, gave it 10 minutes, didn't get any bites at all, so straight away I've gone to 5 metres and started catching. So it tells me that the fish don't want to be that close to the near bank, or it could be a question of the depth as well. So these are all little things that you need to take from when you're fishing your bread punch. So next time, say I'd look at fishing maybe a bit further in front of me rather than down to my right hand side. I'd look to start for maybe at 3 metres, then go to 5 and beyond like that. So I've actually put on a slightly bigger punch this time. I've not mentioned, I've just put on a 4mm just to see if there's a bonus fish down there. And as you can see, there's no bites as yet. So interestingly on this line, after I fed, I gave it a couple of minutes to look on that short line, went on it and started catching immediately. I actually caught a better stamp once I'd fed initially. And as you've been able to see, I've actually had to go down in punch size and start catching a smaller stamp of fish. So what that tells me is that I might need to look to top this line up. When I'm bread fishing, I don't like to top up when I think there's fish there that I can catch. I'd rather catch absolutely everything out of the peg and then look to top up or move. So again, just going back to a 2.5mm punch. The reason why that I want to just make the most of the fish there, again, goes back to the fact that I'm catching quickly. Whatever's there I want to catch and then get those fish out and in my net as quickly as I can, and then I'll look to refeed, because sometimes topping up can put the fish off. So what you don't want to do is spook fish or feeding fish that you can catch. So personally, when I'm bread fishing, I like to wait till the peg goes absolutely dead, top it up, and then if I don't get anything quite quickly, then I'll look to move and start a new line. So to that end, when I am punch fishing, I don't actually feed several lines at once. What I'll do is feed one line, fish it, and if nothing's happening, then move and refeed another one. And as I say, just progress through the session to move up that far bank. A little bit of an indication there. So as I say, there are still fish on this line, but because the bites are starting to slow up and I've had to move down in punch size, I'm starting to think that I might top this line up actually. And what you'll see as well when I do top a line up is I'll go straight back on it, because very often, as I say, the bigger fish can be the first ones to that feed. Which was the case today when we started on this 5 metre line. So bread fishing is very interesting because it doesn't fish like a lot of other methods. You don't have to build the peg over time. The peg actually deteriorates, but it's a very quick response that you will get from the fish. So as I say, when I ship back in, I'll show you the rigs that we're using in line with that to make sure that the bait gets down quickly, registers bites fast, and we can get those fish in our net nice and quick. Because as I say, this line already looks like it's dying on me, and we've only been fishing it for about 15 minutes or so. So I'll just give it another 30 seconds with the bait on the hook, ship back in, and then we'll have a quick look at the rigs that I'm using. They're all identical in terms of the setup, just in reference to the depth, that's the only difference. So in terms of the capacity of the float and the depth that we're fishing. So I say we'll have a look at those now. And then once I've looked at the rigs, I'll look to top up that line, because as I say, it seems to have absolutely died off on me. Right, so as I've said there, that line's starting to dry up, so before I top it up, I'll quickly run through the rigs that I'm using today. I've set up 3 rigs, all identical, apart from, as I've said, the shotting capacity because of the depth that we're fishing in. So I'll quickly run through just the short rig because it's slightly different, and then the ones I'm going to use down the track and across a bit more. So the short rig, which actually hasn't produced any fish today, as I say, it's always worth setting up because you can often catch some little gudgeon and small roach close in straight off the bat, but it's not produced for us today, is this one. We'll start from the top end and run down. Number 3 elastic, as I say, fishing for small fish, but with bread punch fishing you want to make sure that you can swing plenty of fish in. As I've said earlier, you can use quite big hooks and you want to make the most of the fish that are in front of you, so if you can swing fish in, it's always good to have rigs that can do that. You see a lot of people using 1 and 2 elastics on a line like this. Sort of useful if you're using squat and fishing for very tiny fish like fry, but as I say, I'm looking to, as soon as I get a bite with decent sized hooks like we've got, I'm looking to swing that fish in and try and get the most fish out really quickly before the line dies off. So 3 elastic there. As you can see, we've got about 3 and a bit foot of depth. The main line, we've got 093 Drennan Suplex standard, rather than fluorocarbon. It's a line that I use for all my canal rigs because it is so fine, but it also holds shot nicely and it's nice and durable as well. I prefer to use a nice fine main line, and if I'm actually going up in size of hooks, maybe fishing in summer, I actually have duplicate rigs set up with heavier main lines, which would be 011, but 093 is my main line on all 3 rigs. The floats are Sensus SA2s, just with a small number 13 back shot behind it, as you can see, because when you're using small floats and light rigs, occasionally there'll be a chop on the surface, occasionally there won't be. You want to make sure that line beneath the or above the float gets beneath the surface, so I just use a tiny number 13 stop there just to make sure that gets that line sunk, so it's just purely the bristle that's holding the surface tension and not the line, so I know that my shotting is perfect. The floats, as you can see, really short, wire stem, essential when you're looking to bomb and bait down to the bottom with a bulk, because I've said in a lot of my other videos, when I'm using a bulk and droppers, I always have a wire stem, and this is no different. These floats actually have a nice thick wire stem, so they sit very quickly, so it follows your bulk down, sets immediately, and you'll probably seen already just how quickly we can register bites. The bristles, again, nice and short. I'm not looking to have loads of droppers and I'm not fishing through the water, so I want something that sits immediately and registers those bites. Quite a thick hollow bristle. Again, because you're fishing off the bottom, you need to have a hollow bristle that's going to support the hook bait. Again, bread will swell up, so you think when you're looking at a float that it might be undershotted by canal standards. That's what I leave a bit of bristle, because as the bread swells up, it'll pimple that float down that much more. And again, if you're using, say, a fibre bristle or a wire bristle, the float would just sink. With a hollow bristle, it's going to sit in the surface tension nicely, and as I say, register bites nice and positively. So moving down the rig, on this one I've just got a bulk of number 10s and 2 number 11 droppers. On the other rigs it's exactly the same, but what you'll see, I've got a couple of trimming shot there as well, is just how compact the shotting is. On each rig you'll see that it's all in the bottom foot of the rigs. As you can see there, that's the next one up, 4x14s, that one being a 4x12s. You can see just a few inches, maybe 3 inches between the droppers, each of the droppers, and then the bulk. So that makes sure that the bait gets down nice and positively, but instead of just having the bulk above the hook length, there's a dropper there which just offers a little bit less resistance to the fish. Number 11 droppers, again, you'll see a lot of people using 13s and 12s, not the way I like to fish it. Nice positive number 11 droppers, again, register nicely on a hollow bristle like that, so you get nice positive bites that are hittable. And in terms of the hook length, on all the rigs I've got the hook length made from 075 Drennan Suplex fluorocarbon, a line that I like to use for canals, again, nice and thin, and as I've said in previous videos, fluorocarbon's a material I've got a lot of confidence in terms of using. I'm not entirely sure whether it's invisible in water, but it's just something that I've used for ages and have lots of faith in. The hook length, again, is 5 inches. Again, you'll see people using 6-inch, 7-inch hook lengths. You want short hook lengths. In some instances, say the canal's very shallow, I'm on a lot of fish, I'll actually move that down to maybe 3 or 4 inches, but 5 inches seems about right for me. And then finally the hook. This one's a 22, on the other rigs I've got 20s, Kamasan B511s in the smaller sizes. Again, really nice light hook, but a nice wide gape, essential when you're fishing bread. As I say, when the punch swells up, it actually sits quite quite thick that way, and you want a wide gape to make sure you've got plenty of purchase on the fish when you're swinging them, but also when you're hooking them, so you're not striking through the bread. So when I do put the bread on, you'll see I leave the hook point showing again, so I'm not striking through them, so as soon as I get a bite I can hit it. And with the really fine wire on these hooks, they go straight in, and as I say, you don't miss that many bites. And in line with that, as I was saying, if you are missing bites, then it just tells you there's nothing wrong with your rigs, then you can have confidence in those. It tells you that your punch size is wrong. So as I've said earlier and already demonstrated, moving down in the punch size on the same hook, I've started to cut down on missed bites. The other two rigs, as I say, are for fishing further across the canal. Exactly the same floats. Again, you can see with this pattern, even in the 4x16 size, the bristle's very short. On a lot of 4x16s you'd have a lot longer bristles that you might have to cut down, but with these floats, as I say, the Sensus SA2s, even on a 4x16s, the float's very compact, nice heavy wire base and still a short bristle, so perfect for bread fishing. As you can see, further along the canal, this is my 5 metre rig. There's a good sort of 4.5, 5 foot of depth there, and as I say, as we move further across, it does get even deeper, up to about 7 foot. But all the rigs, as I say, are exactly the same. That number 13 backshot being essential as well. And on these rigs, just a 20s hook, because I would expect to catch slightly better stamp fish down the track and a bit further across. So as I say, we've looked at the rigs there, just pop that back in there, and we've shown you a bit about how we're going to go about fishing. But as I alluded to before that, I said I'm going to look at how to top up now. As I say, that line at 5 metres actually started to die off. And as I say, I've moved down the punches, as you've seen, from a 4 to a 3 and 2.5 mil and no bites. So that tells me there's next to no fish there. So what I'm going to do is top that line up. So you can see, giving a nice firm squeeze, because the bread doesn't actually have any real binding properties. So you're essentially relying on the dampness of the bread to hold it together. Nice firm squeeze, plenty of gravel in there, and you'd be able to feel just how heavy that ball is with the gravel. And what we'll try and show now is when I do cook this in, just how quickly it goes to the bottom and how little cloud comes off it. So as always with your fishing, you need a far bank marker. And what I also like to do when I'm bread fishing is fish directly in front of me. So again, I've got as little pull to ship back as possible, nice and quick onto the rollers, and again, just speeding up the process. So I'll try and cut this towards the camera and you'll just see how quickly it goes in and straight to the bottom. If I put in neat punch crumb, then you'd be able to see how that would hold in the surface tension for a second or two, start to break up. But as you can see there, that's gone straight down. There's a tiny little bit of cloud, and that's absolutely perfect. Right, so as you've seen there, I've just topped up the peg and I'm going to go straight over that top up with a 3 mil punch. Again, a decent sized punch, just to make sure that if there are some bonus fish there, as I've said, that do seem to be quickest on the feed, I can catch them straight away. In terms of the bread punches, as you can see, the Drennan Bressad punches, just to run you through how I go about hooking the punch, is I punch the bread out, get a nice punch against the hard base of the draw, and then there's a slot in the side, and all you do is just pop your hook in, as you can see, in line with the angle of the punch itself, and just pull that onto the point there, and the bread will come straight out. In some instances, then always close the drawer, as I say, to keep that bread nice and keep its moisture. Regarding the punch, when it's on the hook like that, sometimes you can get away with fishing the punch like that and it'll swell up vertically up and to cover the shank of the hook, and I almost treat that as if I'm fishing casters and burying the hook, is I'll leave that because then it covers most of the hook. If I think there's a lot of fish in front of me, what I'll actually do is turn it round the bend, as you can see like that. A lot more hook point showing, and if you're getting bites very quickly, that just stops you missing those bites and allows you to set the hook really fast. So I'll just ship that out now, and hopefully we'll be able to put this into practice and show you just how quick you can catch after topping up. As I say, I don't know this bit of canal that well, so it might not be the case, and it might be that after I've topped up I'll have to look at moving to say 9 metres and starting again, but it's not something I'm too worried about. So that float's gone in straight away. We've had a little bit of an indication there, so there's definitely some fish over the feed. And there you go. You can see the difference there already. As soon as I've topped up, I'll just drop that one off there. As soon as I've topped up, immediately I've hooked a fish. which again you wouldn't get with, say, fishing ground bait or anything like that. So just pretty much reiterates, it's a shame I've lost it, the fish, but just exemplifies what I was saying about as soon as you've topped up, go back on that line with a bigger punch, and as I say, straight away we're into a fish there of a decent stamp. As it turns out, it might have been a better idea not to swing that one, but it just goes to demonstrate what we were saying. So clearly the fish here are very confident in terms of coming back to bread when it's been refed. So as I say, on some sections of canal you might top up and not get any bites again, and then you'll have to move straight away, and quite often those can be on sections of canal which are more heavily fished, where the fish recognise that bread going in again means that there's going to be hook baits in and they're going to be caught. Whereas there, as I say, straight away we're into a fish. There's another one now. Smaller than the last, but again, straight into fish. Obviously, if I'm able to catch fish shorter, that's where I want to be catching them. I won't look to go further and further out until that line's absolutely died on me, even after topping up. So in terms of how the session's going at the moment, I'm very happy. As I say, the short line's not produced anything, but I've already found an area of the canal where the fish are happy to feed, and I'm able to get bites quite regularly. And as I say, we've already cooked in 2 bowls of feed, which is actually a lot of feed, because bread, as well as being a ground bait, is something that the fish directly feed on. So it's not like when you're using, say, a very fine ground bait, the fish don't actively feed on the ground bait. They're just picking up particles, and sort of it's more of an attractant. When you loose feed punch crumb, or when you feed punch crumb, it's something that the fish are actively eating. So in terms of where you fish your bread punch, it's very important that you think about that. Something that I haven't actually touched on already is the depth that I fish at when I'm fishing bread punch. Again, because I put gravel in my mix, when it does go to the bottom, it will create a nice little mound, and I believe that's probably about half to a full inch off the bottom. So that's where I put my bread. So I plumb up to absolute dead depth, take plenty of time in doing so, and then just set my float that inch off bottom. So effectively my punch of bread just sits proud of the mound of feed. Again, if the canal's towing a lot, then you might want to fish half an inch or an inch over depth, and that can often be a good way to pick up a bonus fish like a skimmer. But my starting point is always just that inch off bottom. And as I say, that's when you get really positive bites as well. So having to wait a little bit longer for bites on this one. But as I say, I'm just trying to suss out the pegs I'm running through, how I'm going about fishing the bread punch. So I think I'll just step down to a 2.5mm punch. As I say, that's why I have several sizes. As I said earlier, I'll usually use 3, 4 and 5mm, but today the 2.5mm's actually been quite useful. Again, because of the size of fish that I've started catching, if I were to come back to this section, I'd probably use a flower sieve on that mix and probably scale down a little bit, because the stamper fish have been quite small on average compared to other sections of the canal. But again, it's always worth just starting somewhere in the middle in terms of your feed and how positive you set your rigs in terms of hook sizes and punch sizes as well, just to try and suss out a new area of canal like this. So as I was saying about the depth when you're fishing bread punches, I don't like to play around with it too much. I might have it the variation of about an inch, as I say, half an inch off bottom to maybe an inch and a half, but I won't tend to go shallow with it or anything like that. And nor will I look to lay on too much line. Occasionally, as I say, if the canal's towing, then I'll look to put maybe an inch of line on bottom at tops. But when it's nice and still as it is today, I like to fish it just over the top of the loose feed. Again, interestingly, there's not as many bites this time round. So I've caught very quickly, and then the fish seem to have backed off. Again, what I've already identified from the session so far is that the fish are happy to move to the bread punch quite quickly, and they are looking to feed and the depth of water that they want to be in, but what I've not sort of sussed out is how long they're happy to sit over that feed for. As I say, it might be because they don't see a lot of angling pressure that they might back off quite quickly, but again, these are things that you just need to look at when you are fishing the punch and suss out in terms of your local canal, how many fish are there, how they want to feed and things like that, because it will vary from canal to canal, and even, as I say, different sections of this canal fish very differently. So I've not had a bite on this line yet, so already I'm starting to think that it might be an idea to look to open that line now at 9.5 metres. Again, in sort of a 5-hour match, you might only catch on the bread for 2 or 3 hours, so it's important that you make the most of the fish while they are there. In terms of what we're doing today, I'm trying to make the most out of the peg just using bread, so I might have to open several different lines to keep fish coming all day. As I say, clearly they've backed off this line already, so it's certainly somewhere that I would expect fish to come back to, because I've just fed it, caught 2 fish, lost 1, but they've not settled. So obviously when I've got the rig in, I'm catching, they don't have the confidence to stay there. So there's no point wasting time on the bread, so what I'm going to do now is just leave that line. As I said, my short line hasn't worked at all, so I'm just going to leave that, pretty much scrap it. I'm going to feed that line and open that line now, another 2 sections out. It's exactly the same as what I was going on about earlier. Nice decent sized ball of punch crumb, squeezed really tight, plenty of gravel in there. And again, what you need to do when you've made your punch crumb is get that out there very quickly, because obviously it will start to break up even in the air. It won't have the same binding and it won't stay together. So what you want to do is just make sure you've squeezed it as hard as you can, and then as quickly as you can get that bait out to the distance that you've selected to fish. Which, as I say, in this instance at my on my 3rd line is about 9.5 metres. And again, you can see just how quickly that's gone in with pretty much no cloud. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm aware that I've effectively got 2 lines fully fed, one where I'm waiting for fish to settle, and that one there where I'm expecting the fish to be on it very quickly. So I'm going to go onto that long line, and have a look and see if anything moves in over the punch crumb straight away. So again, in that instance, I'm actually going to start on a 3mm punch again. Say if I knew there was some bigger roach or some skimmers present in the section, as I say, if I knew a bit more about the length, then I'd actually start on a 4, maybe even a 5mm punch over that. But I just need to suss out what's in my peg today. So again, because I know that I've not fed this line at the start, I'm actually going to start just on depth. Right, so we're well into the session now. We've had to give a bit of a break from the filming because of the towpath's been a bit busy, and it's been very hectic in terms of the sport with plenty of little fish in the peg. So I'm just going to quickly give you a run through of what I've basically been doing in that meantime. As I say, we sort of left it where we fed that line at 9 metres, and I had to leave that settle for 5 or 10 minutes, had a look on it, and basically it's just been solid with really small fish, you know, sort of blades about ½ an ounce, something like that. So what I've decided to do then is come back on my short line, had a couple of fish and it's died off. So what I've decided to do to make sure I'm able to put some weight in the net is basically concentrate on those 2 lines and just keep topping them up, switching between the 2 to try and keep fish coming. I've caught a better stamp of fish on this short line. Not like this really, these have been the size that I've been catching across, as you can tell, not ideal really. And what I've had to do to feed these off is just keep introducing a ball of ground bait, or punch crumb, sorry, probably every 10 or 15 minutes. So I've actually fed quite a lot of bait today over the 2 lines. I'll just put on another piece of punch now. So what you'll be able to see, as you can tell, fed nearly all of that today so far, and we've only been fishing for a couple of hours really. And as I say, it's because of the quantity of small fish. What I've also identified as well is when I've been fishing is as soon as I've fed, regardless whether it's been a small ball or a large ball, as soon as I've fed, I've caught the bigger stamp fish immediately. So what that's telling me on this instance today is the fact that I need to be careful with how much I feed, but as long as I keep feeding quite regular, I can keep those better stamp fish coming back. What I've decided to do is treat my 9 metre line as sort of my bonus fish line, and I've cupped in even more bait there, and I've really tried to push that area of the peg. The most consistent areas being this 5 metre line, so I don't want to go ruining that. Again, if you're in a match, you need to consider where you can basically put the bulk of your weight together from, and then other areas where you can start to put in, say, bonus fish or have other areas to drop into. But today, as I say, the 5 metre line's been sort of the bread and butter of what we've caught, and I'm just using that 9 metre line sort of as a gauge as to how much I can get away with feeding in response from fish. I don't think the depth has made too much difference, but definitely the fish have wanted to be in that deep water somewhere in the track. So as I say, we've not actually had to chase the fish far up or any further across the canal. I'm sure if I went to 11 metres I'd still catch, but again, at 9 metres down the deepest point of the canal, if I'm only catching small fish, there's no point going further. So as you can see now, I've caught a couple of fish off this short line and it's gone a bit quiet, so what I'm going to do is top up that bowl, get some more punch crumb out, just getting a little bit of an indication there, and again top this line up. So what I'm looking to do on the long line is top up with bigger balls of punch crumb, pretty much something that'll fill the pot, and on this nearer line just cupping in sort of golf ball size every 10 or 15 minutes, and that's what's allowed us to catch really consistently today. And there's a fish on now. Oh no, it's just come off and we've got a leaf. So as I say, those are just certain things that you need to try and gauge when you are fishing a canal like this, and especially somewhere where you don't know a great deal about the peg and how the fish are going to respond. So as I say, I'm now going to just top up on that line and then look to go onto that longer line where, say, about 5 minutes ago I fed a large ball of punch crumb. As you can see there, because I've kept the lid on the ground bait bowl, or the bucket, sorry, it's made sure that the punch crumb's still nice and damp. Again, even though it's still quite cold today, it's very mild, and I'm sure if I left that off the bucket, the punch crumb would soon dry out. Again, it's always worth having to your side your atomizer, and it's always worth just giving it 1 or 2 sprays just before you do actually look to cup it in, especially if you think that it's going to have dried out at all. In terms of the amount of gravel I put in, I actually put in quite a bit today. Again, I'm actually going to put in even more gravel now because of the fact there's so many small fish there. I want to try and make sure that bait's getting directly to the bottom and there's next to no cloud. So by regulating the amount of gravel that you put into your punch crumb and the dampness of it as well, you can regulate and make the bait basically behave how you want to. So as I say, as the session's worn on, I'm now looking to try and get past those small fish and try and get a few better roach into the peg. So I'll just quickly show you the size of balls that I've been cupping in on this short line. Been about that size every 15 or 20 minutes, so you can see just how positively I'm feeding the peg today. Even though there's not lots of fish in front of me, and there's certainly not a lot of big fish, I'm going through a fair quantity of bait. Again, when you go on a lot of canals, you'll see people feeding tiny little amounts of bread like that, which, you know, in some instances where you're fishing for a lot of small fish, it can be fine, but as I say, the way that I go about it is fishing very positive and feeding plenty of bait and making sure it gets to the bottom. And as I say, today we've been able to catch fairly consistently for the duration of the session. Again, the stamp of fish hasn't been particularly great, but that can very often be dictated not by your approach, but the actual section of canal that you're on. Obviously, you can only really catch what's in front of you. So as I said earlier, because I'm now rotating the lines, so I've fed that one, and again, I have caught fish straight after feeding. but it seems to be best to leave it for a couple of minutes before I actually have a look on the line. So get those sort of initial fish, the bigger fish coming in, get them browsing around for a short while, and then when you drop a hook bait on them, they seem to be nice and confident in taking it. And as I say, by doing that, I've been able to keep a good stream of fish coming all throughout the session. So I'm just going to ship out now to the 9 metre line and see if any better fish have turned up there. Again, in terms of the size of the punch, as I've fed more bait, I've realised that the 2.5mm punch is pretty much obsolete now. The session's now just all about using the 3 and 4mm punches to try and get through any smaller fish that are in the peg. The other thing as well is when you're using a slightly bigger punch as well, especially when there are small fish like that pecking at the bait, you get more bites of the cherry, so you get more attempts, say especially if you're fishing long, to wait for that nice positive bite. Again, going back to the rigs, use nice positive rigs, so when you do get a proper bite it bombs under. You might be able to see at the moment I'm getting a lot of little nudges on the float fishing across, and again those are from those tiny little roach that you just saw me catch. Nice positive bite then, but I've missed it. But those are the kind of indications that you're looking for on the bread. But again, it's a nice way of fishing, is this, nice and cheap, and as you can see, plenty of bites. So it's certainly a method that is good for beginners to get into, because it's nice and cheap and you do get plenty of bites, but also it's very apt in terms of in matches, and it gets used heavily and you can really build a good weight on it. So it's a brilliant method to try and get to grips with. And it's definitely something that I'll be looking to employ when I do fish a few matches on the canal this winter. And again, it's a very good method as well if you're looking to fish a short session somewhere, because it's such an instant way of fishing, and as I say, it takes no time to prepare the bread, especially if you've frozen it the night before. Right, so we've just hooked into our last fish there of the session. I've just had to rotate the lines and look on that 9.5 metre line just to try and pick up the last fish, which looks like another one of these roach. Not a bad stamp fish, that. So as I say, it's been a very interesting session today and great fun catching a nice net of these roach. So I'll pop this one in the net, then we'll take them out and have a look and see what we've caught over the course of the day. Right, so as you can see there's our final net of fish at the end of the day's bread punch fishing. It's been a very good day in terms of the amount of bites that we've had, but as you can see, the average stamp of fish has been very small. Again, as I said during the session, that's often dictated by the actual section of canal that you're fishing, but we've had 1 or 2 better stamp fish, you know, a couple of ounces a piece, and certainly in a match we've been very competitive with a weight like that we've had today, probably a couple of pound of fish. So again, it's been a nice session to run through the bread punch. I certainly think it's something that we'll look at revisiting, maybe on one of our sessions videos, possibly on a section of canal a bit further down where there's a few better roach to be caught. But again, hopefully the things that we've covered today in this video will give you a few tips and hints and things like that as to how to go about attacking your local canal with a bit of bread punch, and hopefully you too can catch a few fish on it. So once again from Last Cast, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you on that next episode.